Breaking! The power axis flips. Now, the Kremlin is in tears. Ankara shock. Erdogan moves. Sky revolt. Kizilelma with the Ukrainian heart will absolutely destroy the occupier. Beijing pivot. Russia left exposed. Caucasus erupts. Baku and Yerevan rewrite the script. And Kazakhstan slips the leash. Kremlin staggers. Let's talk about it. Hello, this is Ukraine Today. I'm Maria Farafonova, and here are the latest news. Urgent call to Erdogan. The first details of the conversation are already known. The Turkish leader made the unexpected move. During an emergency call, Erdogan demanded that Putin stop the bloody war and switch to diplomacy. Ankara again officially stated that Turkey is ready to take on a key role in peace talks on Ukraine. During the conversation, the leaders also discussed bilateral relations and global threats, but the main point was that Erdogan made it clear that country's patience is running out. The Turkish president also added that his country will continue to work in the interest of peace.
The president of Turkey stated that achieving a just and lasting peace in the conflict between Ukraine and Russia requires stepping up diplomatic efforts.
Earlier, it became known that Baykar had moved to flight test of the third prototype of the Kizilelma UAV, equipped with precision air-launched munitions and new Ukrainian engine. The company's press service released footage of the trials. The reconnaissance strike drone conducted a flight carrying a 250-kilogram aerial bomb fitted with an add-on guidance kit. The company claims that with the new, more powerful engine, Kizilelma will approach the speed of sound. Thanks to aerodynamic improvements, it will be able to perform more complex maneuvers at higher speeds. Russian media note that Turkish UAVs with Ukrainian engines underscore military cooperation between Turkey and Ukraine. Ukrainian outlets, in turn, point out that Ukrainian-made engines give the aircraft additional power, strengthening the partnership between the two countries. It was also mentioned that Baykar has decided to build a production plant in Ukraine, while Kizilelma and other drones for the Ukrainian military could be manufactured. A blow from where no one expected. China appears to be making a 180-degree turn. It has emerged that imports of high-precision equipment from China to Russia have recently become almost impossible. This was stated by the owner of the Stan company during a metalworking and additive technologies forum.
China has restricted supplies of high-tech equipment, although little is being said about it. Previously, it was possible to obtain machine tools with 3 to 4 micron accuracy. Now it isn't. Such deliveries require a special export license.
He also noted that even the removal of already purchased machine tools from China is accompanied by unpleasant incidents. His company localizes machine tool complexes based on Chinese technologies, and he views the new restrictions as a sign of Beijing's unwillingness to develop partnerships with Russian firms. The Kremlin is reeling as China pointedly turns its back on its ally. Moscow expected support and got a public slap in front of the world. The balance of power is tilting fast. Beijing is betting on itself, not on a doomed Russia. Tension spikes, and now Moscow risks slipping into Beijing's colony, an unexpected twist and a visible shift in the power axis. First details of Russia's public humiliation coming up.
China is Russia's main partner, helping it keep its economy afloat and wage war in Ukraine.
I see.
Count on the very basis of long-standing and established contacts with President Vladimir Putin in various forms and through diverse channels for the dynamic, robust and long-term development of Chinese-Russian relations, which are of great importance. But
is that really the case? After all, at the same time, China denies selling weapons or components to Russia, and Chinese banks have stopped transactions with Russia because of sanctions.
A few, tens of millions of Chinese soldiers. Right now, that would be just what we need. And why do you think so? Why not? Why? Why not? Do you really think only soldiers should be dying? Oh, I see, looking at the Belgorod region. And what about the potential? I think how much we lack the Chinese People's Army.
Very often we hear statements from China that China has never sold weapons to Russia and that China supports the territorial integrity of Ukraine and wants an end to the Russian war in Ukraine.
Just 3 years ago, propagandists were rejoicing, saying, "Let Western companies leave, we'll buy everything from China."
Now we've bought a wonderful, completely Chinese car. Amazing. Many times cheaper than the cars we used to buy before. I bought myself 3 pairs of Gucci shoes. 2,000 rubles each. Wonderful. Probably made somewhere in China as well. I hope here too. Fake, of course. As a matter of principle, I now only buy fakes.
What came of it doesn't even need to be commented on. And that so-called Chinese support for the Russian economy resulted in the bankruptcy of Russian manufacturers.
And just look at what, for example, the soldiers are driving. What, Russian-made cars? You have to be a real patriot to drive a Patriot? Because it costs a fortune. It breaks down all the time. And the spare parts are insanely expensive. That's why the guys drive Chinese vehicles. And now motorcycles are needed. Russian ones aren't available. Why is that? Right? There are very few Russian ones.
And there are no Russian ones at all.
What are we talking about?
No, Russian motorcycles are gone. So what?
Is that?
We don't use them. If you look at the economic aspect, the question is, do they use them? It's just a banal sales market. That is, except for, let's say, the military industry. In contrast, civilian engineering is practically reduced to absolutely zero with very little activity.
And Russia has literally turned into a raw materials appendage of China. By the way, Foreign Minister Lavrov came up with a very apt metaphor, calling Putin and Xi Jinping Shak and Sidianping.
Guests from the East are like guests who follow the host's lead. That's why all the programs, of course, depend on those gracious proposals that the Chinese president and his team made to our president. Basically,
from an economic point of view, all China really needs is cheap raw materials, which, by the way, the Russian Federation has quite a lot of. It's not just natural gas, but also precious lithium, valuable timber, and a variety of quite valuable and essential metals. And it's also gold, actually. In other words, all the things from which China then goes on to produce goods for the whole world.
And this situation manifests itself in completely different aspects. China has officially approved new geographic maps on which part of Russian territory, the Bolshoi Ussuriysky Island, is recognized as Chinese territory. In fact, the Chinese have already settled huge parts of Siberia and turned the territory into their own colonies.
The Chinese dragon is unlikely to stay within its own borders, simply because, by the way, it actually has certain historical claims to a significant part of our Far East. And that's a fact.
Of course, at first there was enthusiasm, but gradually it faded, and eventually we all realized that Asina had become a Chinese colony. It's simply a slave-owning enterprise, nothing more. Whether it's a slave-owning prison or whatever you want to call it, they put in overseers to keep the workers in line, because there is still resentment no matter what. And the workers in Asina went out to protest with the slogan, Asina is not China. And they also regularly threaten, saying that you won't be able to get a job anywhere in this city. Here's your black mark. So just sit quietly for your 15 to 30,000 and keep your mouth shut.
They are very good at waiting. And this ability to wait, it's also about the integration of the Chinese in the territory of the Russian Federation. And in fact, this is already, for all intents and purposes, an annexation. Moreover, if you pay attention to some Chinese maps, certain regions of the Russian Federation are already labeled with Chinese names. Well, listen, why would you need to declare war for that?
Russian television is already showing segments about how to find a Chinese husband, and in Russian schools and government institutions, Chinese is being actively studied.
It's divided into two camps, those who want to study it and those who are skeptical and say, why do we need Chinese? We're not planning to go anywhere. I answer very simply, actually. I say, I'm not really teaching you Chinese here, but rather I'm using the Chinese language to make you think for yourselves. And that skill will always come in handy.
Putin constantly tries to characterize relations with China as a strong friendship, but Xi Jinping literally spat in Putin's face by taking away from Russia that very great victory.
And just yesterday, my friend and representative of the PRC treated me to this kind of Peking duck. I'll be honest with you, there were two pieces there, and I thought I'd only eat one. You know what I mean, right? Yeah. But I couldn't resist. I ate the second one too, you see. It was just too delicious.
China and Russia, being the main theaters of military operations during World War II, made a decisive contribution to the victory over fascism and thus laid the cornerstone for the post-war world order.
China and Russia are neither friends nor partners. And here's what's important. As soon as China has enough motivation to limit its cooperation with the Russian Federation, believe me, it will do so. Russia, frankly speaking, has no other choice. Either be friends with China now or face economic collapse, and as a consequence, political, military, and all other kinds of collapse at the same time.
It turns out that China is not helping Russia save its economy or win the war at all, but is simply taking advantage of its weakness to seize its resources and strengthen its own influence in Asia.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
The war in Ukraine has ended Russia's dominance in the Caucasus, and pushing the Kremlin out of the region is only phase one. President Aliyev makes it clear Moscow no longer calls the shots in Baku. But supplying Ukraine's armed forces with shells and weapons, that's the new reality, and it hurts the Kremlin. More in our report.
Azerbaijan may lift its embargo on supplying weapons to Ukraine and send its Soviet-era equipment to the front. Meanwhile, media reports have emerged that Azerbaijan is launching serial production of artillery ammunition for Ukraine.
Azerbaijan has accumulated quite a lot of weaponry, both from the Soviet era and from more recent purchases made as the country prepared for the deoccupation of its territory. To say that they have a huge amount of weaponry, especially considering the scale of our front and the nature of the war, would not be accurate. But for Azerbaijan, these numbers are quite substantial and impressive.
After the Russians shot down an Azerbaijani plane over Grozny and refused to admit responsibility for what they had done, Azerbaijan took up arms. President Aliyev publicly sided with Ukraine and called Russia an occupier.
And I think this resonates with the aspirations of the Ukrainian people to never accept occupation. That is the main piece of advice. That's what we did.
I think that in Azerbaijan itself, people remember very well who brought war to their land. Formally, yes, it was Armenia, the occupation of Nagorno-Karabakh, but it was the Russian Federation that provided us with complete military, political, and financial support. And moreover, who controlled the occupied Nagorno-Karabakh through so-called peacekeepers? Well, the Russians.
At the SCO forum in Beijing, Aliyev shook Putin's hand very coldly and demonstratively refused to speak with him.
That was an unprecedented act against our people. We are not responsible for the deterioration of relations. We respond constructively and lawfully, but we will never tolerate any signs or manifestations of aggression or disrespect towards us.
Russia didn't lag behind either and began to brutally crack down on members of the Azerbaijani diaspora. The security forces even killed 2 people.
Some of the victims had their ribs broken. There are those who suffered spinal and internal organ injuries. If Azerbaijan had not intervened, the number of victims could have been hundreds of times higher.
In Baku, several journalists from a pro-Russian publication were arrested, directly accused of having ties to the FSB and Russian intelligence. They were said to have been conducting agent-based intelligence activities on Azerbaijani territory in the interests of the Russian Federation. So, in other words, this was a kind of asymmetric response.
But the real low blow was Azerbaijan and Armenia signing a peace agreement in the United States. They completely ignored Russia as a permanent partner and mediator. Russia's influence in the Caucasus is fading away.
Armenia and Azerbaijan commit to permanently cease hostilities, open up trade, establish transport links, diplomatic relations, and also to respect each other's sovereignty and territorial integrity.
The Russian Federation feels its own position is weak. It senses that it basically has no way to influence Aliyev or Azerbaijan. And we see that it has started shelling gas infrastructure used by Azerbaijan already on the territory of Ukraine in the Odessa region.
Now Russia has begun to shell Azerbaijani oil depots and gas distribution stations in Ukraine. So far, Azerbaijan has provided Ukraine exclusively with humanitarian aid, but things could change very quickly.
At the moment, we have provided humanitarian and financial aid totaling 40 million euros, and this assistance is ongoing. It is completely transparent and purely humanitarian in nature. We have implemented several social infrastructure projects in the city of Irpin and will continue to do so. You know that Ukrainian children regularly visit us as guests. We will do everything in our power to help.
According to insider information, there could be several hundred units there, not grads, but smirch systems, I think around 80 or so. In fact, such a reinforcement with equipment in a specific section of the front can significantly strengthen our positions. Plus, there are, let's say, hundreds of pieces of military equipment as well. These are still Soviet-era models, the same APCs, the same IFVs, which would also be absolutely useful for Ukraine.
Given the ongoing attempts by the Russians to harm Azerbaijan, Azerbaijani weapons may soon appear on the Ukrainian front lines.
The Caucasus is boiling. Not just Baku, Yerevan lands a blow on Putin. A watershed moment for Armenia. After 30 years of isolation, the country finally takes the leap. What's happening on the border? What Pashinyan announced? What deal was signed? All the details in our report.
A major event for Armenia. After nearly 33 years of isolation, the country is ready to restore relations with its neighbor and reopen their shared border.
There are no delays or issues on the Armenian side. We are ready to open the borders and establish diplomatic relations as soon as tomorrow.
The Armenian-Turkish border stretches for a total of 328 kilometers, from the triple border junction with Georgia in the north to the junction with Azerbaijan in the south. It has been closed since April 3, 1993, when Turkey unilaterally blocked the border, officially citing the occupation of Azerbaijani regions by Armenian forces as the reason. Back then, 3 decades ago, the Ankara government promised to open the border only on the condition that Armenia would stop seeking international recognition of the Armenian genocide by the Turks and withdraw its troops from the conflict zone in Nagorno-Karabakh. And now, in 2025, it seems that the disagreements between the neighboring countries have been resolved.
Experts believe that in this way, Pashinyan is trying to shift the focus from territorial claims to attempts at building peaceful relations with neighboring countries.
Armenia has only very recently taken a sharp new course toward reconciliation with its neighbors. It was just this August that an official peace agreement signing ceremony with Azerbaijan took place at the White House. The document stipulates that Baku and Yerevan renounce mutual territorial claims and also cease the use of force against each other. And now, just a month later, Armenia is ready to let go of old grievances and start a new chapter in its history with neighboring Turkey by opening the land borders between the two countries.
This is, kind of an important epilogue to the significant August 8th meeting in Washington. And when people in Armenia, Azerbaijan, and indeed many other surrounding countries across the region started saying and truly believing that a lasting peace had finally truly come to the area. And perhaps this could be interpreted as a significant and encouraging gesture for Armenia, specifically coming from Turkey, offering a potential path forward.
However, experts clarify that the intention to open the borders should not be confused with the actual launch of local border checkpoints. Despite Armenia's clear desire to be friends with its neighbors again, the decision to reopen the border will not be made by Turkey alone.
I think that Turkey will not make this decision without coordinating with Azerbaijan.
Experts note there is no breakthrough yet, the borders remain closed, trade is only conducted through third countries, and even diplomatic relations have not been established. And the main reason is still the unresolved issues with Azerbaijan.
Turkey's position in the Caucasus is stronger than ever, and opening the borders with Armenia would only increase the local population's loyalty to Ankara, analysts assert. Nevertheless, some experts believe that the borders between Turkey and Armenia will not open this year, nor in the foreseeable future. After all, discussions about this have been going on since as far back as 2020. On February 11, 2023, it seemed that the end of the blockade was already near. At that time, the border was temporarily opened for the first time in 30 years to allow the delivery of humanitarian aid from Armenia to those affected by the severe earthquake in Turkey and Syria. Afterwards, Erdogan thanked them for their support and once again locked up his checkpoints. After all, Ankara can increase its presence in the Caucasus even without opening its borders.
This means an increase in Turkish influence in Armenia, which in turn means an increase in Turkish influence in the South Caucasus. But they say, sorry, but Mr. Erdogan has made a personal political promise to Mr. Aliyev. So, even though we understand that normalizing Armenian-Turkish relations is beneficial for Turkey, Azerbaijan is still more important than Armenia.
The only thing all experts agree on is that no matter how events unfold in Turkish-Armenian relations, they will be much better than the relationships the Caucasus countries currently have with Russia. In just a few years, Russia has lost all its former influence over the region, ceding this position to Turkey.
Russia will be completely pushed out of the region if this is true.
And it seems that it doesn't have a single bit of anything or, well, any means to influence this. In other words, the time has already been lost. Everything Russia could have done needed to be done back in 2020.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Shockwave in the Russian world. Kazakhstan is slipping from Moscow's grasp at the empire of race. Astana is rewiring trade lanes, tightening its security posture and retooling energy ties, edging toward real independence and new partners. Another nail in Putin's coffin. Is President Tokayev quietly realigning, testing closer coordination with Ukraine, opening westbound corridors and signaling a more balanced foreign policy? What's driving the shift? How far could it go? And how will it reshape the regional map? Watch now.
Ukrainian President Zelensky and Kazakh President Tokayev met in New York for the first time since 2019. On the sidelines of the General Assembly, Tokayev stated that it was time to sit down at the negotiating table, although he did not directly condemn Russia.
Kazakhstan remains concerned about the crisis surrounding Ukraine, which continues to inflict serious harm on civilians, undermine global trust, and weaken international security. Nevertheless, bilateral and international diplomatic efforts to resolve this conflict should continue.
Kazakhstan appears to maintain neutrality regarding the Russia-Ukraine war and offers its mediation services.
Kazakhstan initially offered its services as a possible mediator or as a venue for negotiations between the two opposing sides. This position has not changed.
But as they say, the devil is in the details, especially when it comes to the details of Kazakhstan's relationship with Russia, Ukraine, and much more. For example, Kazakhstan refused to cooperate with Moscow on building a nuclear power plant. Instead, it will be built by China. Also, according to Kazakh authorities, they are preventing Russia from circumventing Western sanctions.
We are taking measures to ensure that our territory is not used to bypass these sanctions. Various comprehensive measures are currently being diligently undertaken, including the meticulous tracking of goods, sophisticated online tracking systems for all consignments, and even the proactive creation of a highly specialized and easily accessible website where you can thoroughly check whether a particular company or a specific product is indeed listed on the official sanctions list. This platform is known as TradeRadar.case. I firmly believe that all our dedicated exporters are fully aware of these crucial regulations and consequently are meticulously complying with them at every step of their operations. And
the president also stated that he does not recognize the legitimacy of the so-called LNR and DNR.
We do not officially recognize Taiwan, Kosovo, South Abkhazia, South Ossetia, or Abkhazia. And apparently, this principle will be applied to all state territories, which, in our view, includes both Luhansk and Donetsk, regions currently experiencing significant geopolitical tensions.
Naturally, Russian politicians and propagandists cannot tolerate such audacity and regularly threaten Kazakhstan with war, claiming the same thing as they do about Ukraine, that these are supposedly originally Russian territories.
And if we don't resolve the issue with Ukraine, then we'll have problems with Kazakhstan, Armenia, and other countries that surround us. Even
with Kazakhstan, well,
of course.
Why?
Look at what's happening in Kazakhstan today in terms of building a kind of Kazakh state, how a national mythology about independence is flourishing there, about the switch to the Latin alphabet. There's a lot of interesting things going on there if you take a closer look.
The situation in Ukraine is clearly mirrored in Kazakhstan. There are also huge regions there populated by Russian speakers.
Some people in Kazakhstan believe that in the future we want to take northern Kazakhstan from them according to the so-called Ukrainian scenario, as they put it. What do you think? Did we ever have such plans? Do we have any intentions like that?
I believe that we have historical rights to that land. These are industrial regions. These are cities that were built by our ancestors. Why did we actually give them away in '91? On what exact legal basis?
Because of this, Kazakhstan has created a list of Russian citizens who are banned from entering the country. This list includes a dozen deputies of the Russian State Duma, as well as the notorious Tina Kandelaki, the ideologist of the Russian world Dugin, and the late husband of propagandist Simonyan.
Oh, my dear Kazakhs, my beloved brothers and sisters, what kind of profound ingratitude is this that you are displaying? Please, take a very close and careful look at the current situation in Ukraine and truly think about it with utmost seriousness. If you genuinely believe that you can continue being so incredibly sly and cunning and somehow manage to get away with such actions without any consequences, then you are profoundly and gravely mistaken.
President Zelensky has repeatedly stated, citing intelligence data, that Russia has military plans for Kazakhstan.
So the information we received indicated that among their priorities are the Baltic countries, Moldova and Kazakhstan. These are the closest targets of the Russian Federation.
The president of Kazakhstan stated that he would suppress any attempts at separatism, while Kazakh deputies went further and laid claims to territories that are part of Russia.
As responsible citizens, we must oppose any manifestations of radicalism, extremism, and separatism. We must be delicate and at the same time firm, and ultimately we must be fair.
Yes, we need to understand that even Novosibirsk is not Novosibirsk, it's Novy Sibir. These are our Kazakh territories. Tyumen is the southern land of the Golden Horde. That is even beyond Tyumen, further north, those are also our territories. And Orenburg, it's not Orenburg, it's Orenburg. And at one time, it was the capital of the Kazakh state.
There was also a lot of different information from intelligence. For example, that Putin demanded that Tokayev supply weapons for the war with Ukraine, and after Ukrainian drone attacks on oil refineries, he was begging Kazakhstan for gasoline. At the same time, Putin constantly, humiliatingly mixes up Tokayev's first name and patronymic, and he probably does it on purpose.
Everyone knows that the president of Kazakhstan, Kemaljemovich Tokayev, appealed for help to the members of the Collective Security Treaty Organization.
So as Kemaljemovich, he addressed Ilyich and... So, Zheme Kasamzan Kemilovich, I still see you now. So Kasamzan Kemilovich said that somewhere he has 27 billion. Respected Kasamzan Kemilovich.
Putin's plans included dragging Kazakhstan into the so-called Union State. Following the example of Belarus, but he didn't succeed, Tokayev only mocks such proposals.
Recently, the president of the Republic of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, suggested that Kazakhstan join the Union State. But I appreciated the joke as it deserved. I think there is no need for this, since there are other integration associations. First of all, the Eurasian Economic Union. As for nuclear weapons, we don't need them.
Even those who seem to be Russia's closest allies understand that it's impossible to trust terrorists and murderers. That's why they need to be kept at a distance and, if possible, support those who oppose them.
What do you think about the latest events? Share your opinion in the comments, like the video and stay informed about the main headlines. More to come.